Welcome back. My name is David Pinto. I'm going to talk us through academia. Again, the problems that academia has. However, before I do that, I want to illustrate how amazing academia has been and currently is. Okay, it is amazing that we have the pursuit of truth. Okay, that we have an institution. They evolved, 1300s, I think it was. Coimbra, I think, was one of the first universities in Portugal, where it's not quite secular, but it's separating itself from religious practices. And over the centuries, it's become a haven for the pursuit of truth, okay, philosophical truth, but it's also been useful for the development of science and the separation of science from religious dogmatism. Okay, so there's been the most recent social science development has been the first development of social science was either Comte or Durkheim. Durkheim analysed some data in Paris and managed to derive the relationship between poverty and some illness. I can't remember what it is. Okay, in Paris, and that was the use of statistics. So the maths, in terms of statistics, for the social phenomenon was the beginning of sociology. Okay, so it's an amazing thing. And before him, I guess, Marx's theories about economics and his theories of the transformation of economics from a from feudal into a capitalist system and then into a potential socialist or communist state, and predicted that. And of course, it was used by Lenin, so on and so forth, in Russia, first demonstrated by them, to show the impact that academia and academics had on real world events. So it is amazing that science has managed to extract itself from religion. And even in the 19th century, we're talking about Darwin and his theory of evolution and how hard it was for him over his entire lifetime to propose arguments that were eroding people's beliefs in Christianity. Okay, and how hard that was at the time. So it's been remarkable improvements. Or, for example, so it's been incredible. Academia is an incredible institution that we have evolved over the centuries. However, there are some problems regarding it, and some of them are, there's a few others here which I'm going to just mention. The most obvious one, because I've just talked about economics and business, is commercialization. Commercialization. That's why I write these things up beforehand, because you can hardly read it. I'll rewrite that properly later. Commercialization. What's happened is that this pursuit of truth, this kind of like haven of being able to just explore things for the interest and joy, fascination and truth of it, for its own purpose, is what an academia is meant to be. However, it has become commercialized somewhat, and it's to do with the number of students, because it's run like a business, and it's been improved, and it's got money flow. It means that it needs to have more people on the seats, bums on seats, in order to secure the income. So it runs like a business, okay? And so there have been, this is morally questionable, like we've talked about in terms of business. Okay, I'm going to might as well go bottom up. There is a predominance and dominance of hard sciences in the academia. Okay, and although we have many different departments with English and French and history and so on and so forth, the dominance of academia is based on the truth, the valency, and the pragmatic results of physics and sciences. Okay, it's actually managed to control the world. We've managed to control the world by extracting the methodology of science, and because it's proven that, and we've managed to get a man on the moon because of actually some mathematics by Newton or Leibniz, the methods that we develop for science have got dominance. And it means that those disciplines that are relationally based, okay, that are not based on objects and studying objects, those that are more relationally based are kind of sidelined. So all of the theories that have kind of evolved from Freud and I've just forgotten the guy's name, or further on with Lacan and various other psychoanalysts and therapists and social therapists, all of those. So, for example, most recently, social inquiry. It's kind of sidelined because it doesn't quite have enough method, theoretical and practical method, as stable and as strong as the methods developed for science. Now, that means that social science itself is essentially non-relational, which is a little odd, that the basis of social science and a lot of the social science that is conducted is done using methods that we've evolved from the study of objects. I'll jump to that top one there. Okay, so the methods of objects, so the study of physical objects, our scientific process, and our deductive processes is evolved from mathematics. So mathematics is considered to be the queen of sciences, which means that science is the king of sciences, or the king of academia. And so, because of the fact that the methods, mathematical methods have evolved, have been about the study of objects, literally physics, physical or natural science is the study of physical objects. How things drop. Okay, from Galileo through Newton and his calculus, they developed mathematics in order to control and understand physical reality, and hence, get a man on the moon. Okay, but even earlier than that, we're talking about accountancy. We're talking about counting things and the whole idea of measurement of things and distance and so on and so forth, and then doing the mathematics on that and being very careful and rigorous. And we've developed various methods to prove our science methodology. Involve Occam's razor to explain something with a minimal number of explanations or factors, to have control. So it's exactly the same experiment, but with one change. You see what the result is, and therefore you can account it to that one change, and various other things. However, actually another problem is it doesn't deal with complex systems very well. Although we've got mathematics of complex systems, our actual study of complex systems like hormones or the environment is basic at best, and our understanding of how we communicate our consciousness is conducted through mostly the brain. Okay, so we're trying to understand what consciousness is by actually examining the physical structures of the brain, or with mathematics and coding to simulate neurons. And we have neural mapping. We don't quite understand what's going on, but we can simulate it. Okay, so this is these methods are basically the same methods we apply to being external to things and studying things. We've applied those methods to people, okay, to limited success. The psychology, the entire branch of psychology is attempting to apply those scientific methods to people by conducting experiments with people. And that brings into question our ethical basis of how we can conduct experiments on other people. Okay. However, more practically than that, we have this problem of theory-practice gap. I was a teacher in education in secondary school, and what the theory was, and we've got lots of theory, we've got lots of evidence, actually, of how it is that we learn and motivation and so on and so forth. It's all great, but then when you actually go to school and you actually see what is happening in the classroom at school, it's got very little of this theory or even evidence implemented. Okay, and so what's happened is we've known how we can learn and improve our learning for at least 20, 30 years, but there's just not quite getting into schools. And so what academia has been doing in for example, education departments and various other things, is they've been spinning their wheels and just gone into more and more excruciating detail, because that's the tendency, again, to study objects, to analyse, to exactly how does motivation work, and how does that relate to self-efficacy, and how does that work to relationality? Oh, okay, right, let's study that, let's try and change one factor and see what factors are important, and so on and so forth. And try to get evidence for that. But and it's going into more and more detail. And of course, if you're a teacher in a classroom, you've got 30 adolescents that are maybe want to be there, maybe not wanting to be there. It's quite a difficult thing to focus on one specific element or some abstract systems, or if something more solid comes out of it, a more, a practical system that's meant to be implementable, you have to be trained in it in order then to implement it in schools. Now, this isn't really a problem of academia. Part of it is the problem of academia is specialization. Okay, so practice gap because of specialization. Okay, I'm going to write this properly. Specialization. And that's related to analysis. Analysis leads to specialization. So, we've got these problems in academia where the more we analyze and the more we become specialists, the more the theory gets more detailed and the further we get away from the actual practice, because the practice is changing too. So, for example, in education, I went through education at the beginning of blackboards and then smartboards, and then the students started getting like Nintendos and Sega machines, and then they phased into Xboxes and PlayStations. And I was teaching students that were up till 3 o'clock in the morning playing, PlayStation games, and now they've got goggles and they're like plugged into some virtual reality or social media. So all the socially competent children that are interested in social dynamics are watching social media, watching social reality TV, watching Instagrams, flicking through things. Their attention span is not watch a television program, it's double screening or even triple screening. Okay, and then they go into a classroom and it's like, sit and watch, pay attention. We're going to talk about this. They haven't even chosen to watch that. And here it is. They're going to talk about something in excruciating detail at a very slow pace. It's like, wow. Okay. So there's massive gaps between what the theory is and how they're conducting the theory in academia and the practice, for example, in education, or for example in business. Okay, business is changing at a rate of knots. And a lot of academia is just chasing after, we've got HTTP. Oh, okay, the internet. Oh, right, we've got to see if that's useful. Oh, now we've got social media, Facebook. Oh, okay. And it takes so long. It takes a year and a half to get any kind of academic paper published. Okay, because of the traditional forms. Legacy, another big problem. I know about this because I've just done a PhD or started a PhD. We've got a legacy of paper, basically. So the majority of academia is still hindered by the fact that they're held accountable by the number of publications they produce, the number of publications. And okay, if you're producing a hard science, that's kind of reasonable. But if you're talking about a soft science, you're talking about interrelationality, the bias of hard sciences means that it's influencing our ability to come up with gentle or significant or meaningful or deep or significant material about how we engage that might actually be helpful for example, people in school or people in business. The problem is that because how business works, because of how economics works, and in fact how education works with a bunch of people in a room, it kind of collapses down to a C state, it means that whatever they're coming up with, it's always like too late. So it's too much detail. And even if you did manage to produce the subtlety and the beauty, the systems that people are operating externally don't have the time. Just don't have the time. So massive problems with academia, right? Went into that in a little bit too much detail. Is there an alternative? Yes, there is. However, I'm going to call it reflexive. Now, it's actually called reflexive reading because the predominant tick that academics use currently is articles, okay, and they read. Now, again, rather than, like with all of these things, go into great detail about academia, okay, or economics and so on and so forth, well, I'm introducing or talking about the potential theoretical alternatives, which is what a lot of people do, and then argue about it. Okay, I'm proposing a specific technique. Okay, a specific, for example, in economics is scale, specific technique or method in business is the action cycle, and so on and so forth. Okay, now these are techniques that we're using to not to counteract, but to create an alternative system that changes how these problems that we're experiencing basically avoids them from arising in the first place. Now, so it's not a theoretical perspective. It's not a theory that's being proposed. It is, well, we've got to realize this, okay, and try this. So if you give this a go, it might be useful. I'm going to describe it very briefly, and then if you're interested, then you can actually go into it. And I spent quite a reasonable amount of time talking about that because I'm just starting a PhD doing that. Okay, so reflexive reading. Now, but if you're interested in why we're explaining that, it's because what I want to do is connect it to these other alternatives in order to create a space. And it's this space that I'm wanting for us to explore. Okay? So reflexive reading, what is it? It basically means, there are okay, there are several, for reflexive reading, there are several trajectories that are going, I think, in the right direction, but can't actually land. Okay, there's a lot of theory, and there's a few gaps, but they just can't be filled. So there's a whole sequence of phenomenologists, okay, starting with James, 1912, Whitehead at the beginning of the 20th century, and then later in the mid-century, Bakhtin, Dewey, and they're talking about the indivisible event experience. Phenomenology, not noumenology, which is basically what is, ontology. It's what is. It's more our experience of it, or epistemology, more like. So it's a phenomenon is something that we experience. And so phenomenologists are interested in what's my experience of something. Okay, and as I say, because of the methods within science that are predominantly based on the study of objects, phenomenologists, philosophers talked about this. So, for example, Wittgenstein, he came up with, he was doing mathematics, and then he realized, wait a minute, the whole thing is a bit wrong. You've got it upside down, and it was all about perspective. It's all about your subjective phenomenological experience. So there are interesting thought experiments that, for example, Wittgenstein came up with regarding, for example, the perspective of two people and you might have seen this video on the internet, two people looking at the same number, and one person sees it as 6 and the other person sees it as 9. Okay, or if you're looking at a Necker cube, okay, we're looking at a cube. Okay, that's not the best Necker cube. Okay, in fact, it's better if you just do that line right there. Okay. Okay, I'm going to have to redo that. Okay, I'll do that. The Necker cube. Why am I so bad? Why can't I? When I'm teaching, I'm like brilliant at this, but why is it even? I can't even draw basic Necker cube. God damn it. Right. Okay. That's a terrible cube. That's a terrible cube, but such is life. So, for example, with the Necker cube, it's whether, for example, you're looking at it so that the front side, for example, is that angle. So that's the front side, that's the front, and that's from the top. Or you're looking at it where the bottom, we're looking at it from the bottom, it's from there. Okay, so we're looking from underneath, and we can see this cube. So we're either looking, okay, from the top, it's very much like this one actually, from the top, and you can see a box, and it's a box on something where this is the corner coming out towards us, and that mess at the back is the back corner. Or we're pulling that back corner to the front, so this is the front corner, and we're looking like something on the ceiling. We're looking at a box on the ceiling. Okay? So that's through perspective and necrocube. Now that transformation is important for reflexive reading. Okay? God, what the hell am I talking about? Jesus, I'm tired. So we've got different perspectives, for example, Wittgenstein and so on, regarding how do we approach, we're talking about phenomenologists, okay, right? So we've got a whole sequence of phenomenologists that basically try to promote the possibility that we actually understand things only through our phenomenal experience. However, it doesn't sit well with the dominance of hard science. So rather than argue and add to the phenomenologist's argument, we're simply proposing a practice. Schotter, 2016. We're introducing a hermeneutic practice, an imaginative hermeneutic practice, where we're appreciating the reading of literature. So it's not about the writer. So when we're talking about the methods of objects, it's sometimes known, it's been called the invisible subject by Roth, 2020. He talks about organic theory. Okay, so what we're talking about, what we're interested in is not that, okay, so science is almost like, and I've read this even in articles, where theories are considered to be lenses. You might think about them as being lenses, glasses, because a lot of academics do have glasses because they're reading a lot, right? Or it's a microscope. So you're looking through your instrument, which is a theory, or it's a telescope. So you're trying to look at, and that's these objects, these methods we've developed in science, and so we've adapted that language for theories, even in social sciences. And so there are social sciences where we're studying other people through telescopes, okay, theoretical frameworks that are like telescopes. And that gives you an idea of the distance between us and the people that we're studying, okay. And so the subject becomes invisible because we're looking at such a distance, and then we're writing down things, maybe measuring some things, and then we do analysis of the writing, even if it's verbatim, where they're actually telling you what to write and they're dictating it and you write it down, or you record a conversation with them like this, and then you write all that down and then analyze it. We're losing the subject. Somewhere in that process, we're losing the subject. And it's all just about analysis of symbols and mathematical analysis and so on and so forth. However, there's another aspect, another subject which is lost, which is the person conducting the science. Objective science, you want to remove the scientist. So basically, anybody conduct this experiment and get the same results. However, in terms of any kind of social context, education or business or religion, it really does depend on who you are and what you bring to the social condition. Okay. Now, academics have become aware of this, and there is a couple of meta theories that have indicated this. Baskar's critical realism, and for example, first, second, and third order cybernetics. So first order cybernetics is studying of a system. Second order cybernetics is you're involved in the study of the system, and they're actually aware of you. Okay, so that's like family therapy. So that the person that you're doing therapy with is aware that you're a therapist and you're participating in that. But also the person who's talking about their family is involved in the family. They can't just talk about the family as if they're an object. Okay, so second order cybernetics includes the person doing the exploration within the system. And third order cybernetics, which they're only just recently playing around with, is to do with self-organizing systems, that you're just part of a complex system. Okay, so you're just one member of a family or one participant in a company. Okay, it's not that you're the study of that. Okay, so the academic's positionality of the academic is not just observing it from afar through a telescope, not just being involved in the system, but involved in the system, like, for example, you're a teacher in a classroom, and that's it, you're just part of that study. You're not allowed to have an objective perspective on that. Okay, you're actually involved as a participant. And in fact, of course, academics are participants in the complex social space of economics and business and so on and so forth, as we pointed out regarding commercialization, this, that, and the next thing. Or Foucault and the postmodernism and all that kind of stuff to do with whatever it is that we think, even if we're talking about the Romans, actually we're informed by our experiences now. Okay, so we might think we're talking about the Romans, or we think we're talking about Wittgenstein. Well, kind of. We've got some notes that he wrote, and we can kind of try to guess what he said, but we're very much informed by our understanding, our education, and so on and so forth, in current world conditions. And Wittgenstein wasn't. He didn't have the internet. He didn't have these effects. So it's very difficult to say, oh, this is what Wittgenstein said, this is what Rousseau said, this is what they thought. We can say what they wrote, fine, but what they thought, that's a little bit more questionable. So, how do we get out of this massive academic kind of like thought experiment? Well, we're going to introduce, instead of arguing about it, we're introducing this reflexive reading. And we're basically simply saying three things. So I went on about that way too much. What we're saying, jeez, I've got too much to do. No, I've got to stop this. It's just too much. I'm like sweating here.